This is Rummy's Corner.
Back in July, Terence "Bud" Crawford became the undisputed world welterweight champion when he put forth a dominant effort against Errol Spence Jr. Crawford dropped Spence several times before the fight was mercifully stopped in round 9. The victory held great historical significance. Crawford became the first undisputed world welterweight champion during the modern 4-belt era. This was just the 10th time any man had ever won the undisputed world championship in any weight class during the modern 4-belt era. And most amazingly, Crawford has done it twice. First at 140 and then again here at welterweight. Indeed, Crawford is the first and only man to become a 2-division undisputed world champion in the modern 4-belt era. Beyond that, the dominant nature of the victory over a fellow pound-for-pound elite propelled Crawford to new heights, where many, if not most reputable boxing publications, namely Ring Magazine, ESPN, and TBRB, all have Crawford listed as their #1 pound-for-pound king of boxing. And for what it's worth, no disrespect meant to Inoue or Usyk, but I agree that right now, Crawford belongs at the top. Despite the enormous magnitude of his victory and the historical significance thereof, just 4 months later, the IBF stripped Crawford and they awarded their title to Jaron Ennis. Personally, I hate this sort of thing. It sucks. And let me be clear, this is in no way, shape, or form meant as a criticism of Ennis. I believe he is an extremely talented young fighter with a potentially very bright future ahead. And I hope we get to see him in some of the bigger fights out there sooner than later. But the entire situation sucks for him too. Anytime a champion is given a belt without winning it inside the ring sells everyone short. It screws over the champion being stripped. It screws over loyal boxing fans, and it screws over the recipient of the new championship that was not earned inside the ring. Examples of this are plentiful, and recently you have examples like Devin Haney being awarded the WBC belt after they stripped Lomachenko of their real belt and gave him some honorary trinket. And even more recently, you have Tim Tszyu being given the WBO belt after Charlo was stripped when he moved up to challenge Canelo. Quasi-related, after Bo vacated the WBC belt, Lewis was given the belt without winning it in the ring. All of these guys at the time were viewed as holding inferior brand belts, because not only were they given the belts without beating the previous rightful champions of said belts, but they did not have to beat anyone to even win the vacant belt. They were just given the championship. And regardless of any of the alphabet schemes with their interim belts and the great abundance of other lower level belts, which was always a ridiculous concept to me, you're either a champion or you're not. But just being given a belt without needing to literally win it in the ring, it sucks just as much for the guy being given the championship as it does for the fans. Lennox was mocked for picking the WBC belt out of a garbage bin. And guys like Haney, Tszyu, and now Ennis are mocked as being so-called email champions. The situation here with the IBF is even more peculiar when you consider that Spence first won that belt from Kell Brook all the way back in May 2017. And Spence held that title more than 6 years until losing it in July 2023. During that entire 6+ year reign, Spence only fulfilled one single mandatory defense for the IBF organization. That was when he stopped Ocampo in round 1. That was in June 2018, which itself was more than 5 years ago. It's also a bit of a head scratcher that Ocampo was named as a mandatory in the first place. The IBF rules never allow for immediate rematches. Yet strangely, they usually allow for unification to take priority over mandatories. So they're all about unifying, but if and when you do unify, no immediate rematches for you. It's a stupid arbitrary rule that has no common sense in situations like this. The IBF knew that the loser of the fight could and likely would invoke a rematch clause, and that the winner chooses to wait. Beyond that, Spence had not made a mandatory defense of his IBF in more than 5 long years. And now Crawford has been champion for a mere 4 months, which is nothing in a day and age where top champions typically only fight once or twice a year. In what world does this shady move from the IBF make sense? Crawford ain't just some run-of-the-mill holder of the IBF trinket. Crawford is arguably the pound-for-pound king of boxing, and he made boxing history on several fronts when he put on his masterclass performance against Spence. Now the IBF is already preemptively pulling the same thing with Fury and Usyk. They will allow for undisputed unification, but once we have an undisputed world heavyweight champion, the first one we will have had in nearly 24 damn years since the great Lennox Lewis last held that distinction, then no immediate rematch is allowed. The winner must face Filip Hrgović. An historically unprecedented rivalry is brewing, where potentially we will have our very first undisputed heavyweight champion in almost a quarter of a century, where a winner would be crowned the first such during the modern four-belt era. Naturally, there will be rematch clauses in place for an historic fight of this magnitude, for undisputed heavyweight supremacy. The IBF has lost the plot here, and their rules need to allow for common sense flexibility. Again, the IBF is saying they are all about unification, but once that happens, get bent and face our mandatory. Incidentally, all of these organizations are wishy-washy when it comes to enforcing mandatories, and one need look no further than the heavyweight division to illustrate this point. Tyson Fury has not defended against the WBC mandatory since April of last year, with no mandatory scheduled on the horizon. The WBO has not enforced a mandatory in more than 2 years, since Usyk first defeated AJ, and their mandatory Big Bang Zhang has to wait his turn in the alphabet rotation. For the IBF, it has been almost 3 full years since AJ beat Pulev. And until Usyk recently beat Dubois back in August, the WBA Super Duper belt had not enforced a mandatory since AJ beat Povetkin all the way back in September 2018. Dubois being named as a mandatory is another head-scratcher. Bottom line here, Spence made one IBF mandatory defense in 6+ years. And now Crawford won that belt in epic fashion a mere 4 months ago, and they took it away. It is a bad look for the IBF, it sucks for Jaron Ennis, and it is just another in a never-ending list of examples that expose the flaws in the alphabet pay-to-play scheme that elite-level prize fighters are forced to operate under. Again, this is not meant to disrespect the boxers, they're just following the rules of the day. This is meant to disrespect the shady pay-to-play scheme and arbitrary rules that all of these alphabet bodies exploit and make up as they go along. Thank you very much for watching, everyone. I hope you enjoyed and have a wonderful night. This is Rummy's Corner.